and the day after Christmas. Do you have this on your calendar? It says New Year's Day, which is fine. All right, January 1st, in case you didn't know. And then on January 2nd, it says day after New Year's.
Wait, let me check their math on that.
The
Stand
day
by.
after New Year's.
Note that this is Joel's, I believe that is a Siberian Husky calendar.
That is.
I think it's limited to Siberian Husky puppies, probably.
Yes.
Siberian Husky puppy
Yes.
calendar.
Yes. Thank you very much, Sam, for that calendar. And you're listening to the Stack Exchange podcast number 40, the one without Will Wheaton. You know, actually, last week, a lot of people complained because we advertised it as a podcast with Will Wheaton. But as it turns out, people listened all the way to the very end, and Will Wheaton never actually came on. So I think this is going to be podcast number 40, the one with James Vanderbeek. We have our usual guest in the studio, Jay Hanlon. Hey, Jay, say hi.
Hello.
David Fullerton.
Hi.
Producer Alex in the background.
Hi.
Special visitor today who just walked by, and we were just like, come here, you got to tell us something, because we didn't really have anything to talk about on the podcast. It's Britton Payne, who's a professor of
Copyright, Trademark, and Emerging Technologies.
Copyright, Trademark, and Emerging Technologies at Fordham University.
At Fordham Law, yeah.
Which is a law school here in Manhattan. I'm going to go with Manhattan.
Yes, true.
They also have a branch outside of Manhattan, but not for the law school. Okay, anyway. He was walking by, and I said, hey, we don't have anything to talk about in the podcast, so tell us something about intellectual property.
And so what I got into is that about 15 years ago, to figure out a way to deal with computers, Congress passed the Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
Right, that was one of the awful Clinton things.
It was certainly during the Clinton era, but some people obviously don't like it, but some people have found it to be useful guidelines for how to handle certain problems, even though maybe the problems could have been solved better in different ways.
And that's where I guess the DMCA is best known for those takedown notices, which is that those of us that provide websites where random people can just stick stuff up on the internet are basically not liable for the particular content that shows up there.
Yeah, for user-generated content. It provides a safe harbor so that the people who facilitate the posting of content don't get in trouble for the infringing uses that their users make.
Right. As long as they have a particular procedure for taking it down if it turns out to infringe.
There are a couple of requirements. You have to have a procedure in place. You have to, in fact, enforce the procedure. You have to have no actual knowledge of it. So once you know about it, you're no longer entitled to the protection. Right. And that's why it's notice and takedown. Once you are provided with notice, and the notice can be is given a statutory guideline for how you're exactly supposed to make that notice. So you can actually say you don't have statutory notice if the notice doesn't include all the information, like the address of the infringer or something like that.
Right.
You know, and so that sets up a system so that people at the time, AOL doesn't get in trouble for the things that its users do, as long as it takes care, as long as it follows these procedures. Mm-hmm. So it's a little more detailed than you would like to have your laws be. Nonetheless, it provides something that you can at least follow, and to a certain extent, I think has worked.
Mostly.
There's a bit of a practical balance that is somewhat helpful, I think, from our perspective, in that, well, there's a lot of problems with the DCMA. The thing that is nice, I think, for a site like us is it prevents someone from just running around saying this violates my copyright, my intellectual property, and you're then trying to interpret. They have to attest. They basically have to swear under oath that they own this thing, which prevents frivolous.
Well, kind of. Although it does get used frivolously all the time. And then there's sort of two problems I've noticed with the DMCA, or basically two loopholes that have since been uncovered. And the first one is that some of the big publishers like YouTube with Google have created an alternate non-DMCA takedown system that basically allows these IP companies that represent other companies that allegedly own copyright to just sort of scan all of YouTube and issue non-binding takedown notices, which Google then takes down. So it creates a chilling effect where they take down all kinds of stuff that doesn't really need to be taken down. A lot of times it's like some music was playing in the background. Or
yeah, well, there was a big case about that. It was called Lens v. Universal, where this woman's baby was dancing in the kitchen to Prince's "Let's Go Crazy."
But that was actually so that was certainly a fair use, right? Like there was no court would ever have not said that was fair use.
There is no decision as to whether or not it was a fair use, because what had happened was in issuing the takedown notice, one thing that you swear to, like Jay was saying, is that that this is an infringing use. In order to determine whether or not something is infringing in good faith in requesting it to be taken down, you have to at least consider fair use.
Yeah.
And the group that had written, Universal, I guess it was, who had issued the takedown notice, hadn't considered fair use. Now, they were allowed to consider it and say, oh, yeah, I don't think that's fair use, then issue
but they didn't even
they
do
would have
that.
been fine.
They didn't
Right.
even go that
But
far.
that's actually, and so that seems like a nothing, right? That seems like just a silly little, oh, well, that's
no, but
no
this
obstacle.
happens. I mean,
But that is in fact an obstacle, because now if you actually have to consider fair use, can you guys write a computer program that considers fair use? Probably not. You need an eyeball to look at it, right?
So like an automatic DMCA.
So that's why
generator
automatic
won't work.
DMCA takedown generator notice won't work.
Interesting.
It will.
That's really
it will
cool.
Violate
But-
Lens v. Universal.
So that's why they have to make a special cut aside deal with YouTube,
basically.
where they take it down, not based on copyright infringement, but just because they feel like it.
Yeah, and,
Right.
and you're allowed to do that when you sign up. But what it sets up a separate regime for it that
Right.
is not enforced by the DMCA, but
Right.
enforced by your end user license agreement.
Right. Which is
So when you sign up for YouTube, you're saying, I'm going to post things to YouTube. You can take it down for any reason or for no reason, and I won't sue you.
We actually had a problem where we produced a series of documentaries at Fog Creek. Brett, Michael probably told you about this. We produced a series of documentaries, writing great smart code. I can't remember the name of it. And it was a bunch of documentaries about software development. And we actually, in one of those documentaries, there's a piece of a performance of The Queen of the Night, which was written by Mozart and is not actually copyrighted anymore because it's from quite a while ago, but the performance itself is. And so we licensed it, and we paid somebody a lot of money to actually license that particular piece. And because of that piece, it was trapped by the automatic filters and it got taken down from YouTube. And it turns out that no amount of attempting to appeal that could get that put back up, because they know that you're quote unquote infringing, but they don't bother to check if you actually have a license for the performance that you're using. So there's sort of gigantic things that fall between the gaps on this. The assumption is anybody posting something on YouTube could not possibly have gone to the trouble of licensing
but that's not a
piece of
that's
work.
not a DMCA problem, right?
No.
YouTube has essentially decided that because they're
They're
getting
gonna-
62 years of video every day, they'd rather let the companies do the work and accept whatever they say than create a stricter way where they would take some responsibility for sifting
So
through
they've
it all.
actually created a regime that is unnecessarily, has sort of unnecessary chilling effect.
And it's more so than the DMCA, actually, because
Right,
the DMCA establishes a counter notification procedure,
Right.
whereby if your thing gets taken down, then you notify AOL, which is who they had in mind when they wrote it. And you said, AOL, you should not have taken it down.
Yeah.
Then AOL in turn contacts, Prince and says, look, Prince, we're going to put it back up in 10 days unless you file an actual court action, and we're washing our hands of this whole thing. You
Is that how
guys,
you'd address
you guys
Prince?
work it out. Mr. Prince. Yeah, I think that's what they would have said.
I just wouldn't start look.
Well, I
Prince.
think he was-
some respect has been.
I think he was boyoyoing at the time.
I'm gonna go with
You know who we're talking
yeah,
about.
or One Direction, Justin Bieber, somebody that we have a younger audience. They may not know who Prince is. It was Niall from One Direction. Okay, so what's changing about this?
Yeah, well, so that actually that's one part of the DMCA. Another part of the DMCA is anti-circumvention technology. So the idea that you can't crack a DVD, that's a significant part of what it was. So they said that, okay, well, it is going to be considered an infringement of copyright if you see this thing that says you're not supposed to access this and you try and access it anyway.
So yeah, that was actually one of the maddening things about the DMCA, is to say that sort of attempting to reverse engineer stuff or to sort of hack into it for purely scientific purposes, not for financial gain or in order to.
Yeah, and there are other parts of the Copyright Act that protect reverse engineering and that protect cracking something to try and figure out what it is, and particularly for repairing computers, that's something. But there are several cases that came down the pike that said, look, if you have the right to use the ideas contained herein, which you do under copyright law, and you need to make a temporary copy for the purpose of getting to that information, the only way that you can.
Like a
So if you wanted
backup
to
or-
make, yeah, but also it was like if you think of an Atari cartridge, if you want to make a cartridge that functions with an Atari, you probably need to make a copy of the console software in order to figure out how it would interact with a cartridge, because you're allowed to make supplemental works that work in conjunction with other works. So how does that get reconciled with the fact that you can't make a copy? Well, the answer is you can make a copy for the purpose of creating a supplemental work and then essentially erasing it. So taking no more than you need, in the same way that you can parody something by taking no more than you need in order to make your point.
So let me ask a question. So let's say you've got a DVD and your DVD player is dying. It's very tragic. It's very sad. It's been sick for some time. And you then take that DVD, and so as your DVD player is dying, you then rip the DVD to a MP4 file or whatever, using Handbrake or whatever, some application. So it's on your computer, and then you destroy the DVD because you weren't actually trying to duplicate it and spread it around. So you still only have one copy which you bought rights to. Is that a violation of the? I know backups used to be explicitly permissible prior to the DCMA, but I don't know DMCA. I keep doing that. I don't know if that is that the is that would that be illegal under?
Well, you're kind of talking about two different things. The DMCA, well, they're different parts of the DMCA. The reality of it, I was just talking to Michael about this. The reality of it is that you've made a copy.
Michael is a well-known DVD bootlegger. Is probably
you have made a copy, an unauthorized copy. However, that unauthorized copy will be forgiven if it constitutes a fair use. The Supreme Court, basically back in '84-ish in Sony v. Universal, the Betamax case, decided.
You're saying the Supreme Court may come to my home. This is I don't know where this is going.
Justice Ginsburg is going to knock on your door, and so you are essentially allowed to make copies of works for the purpose of time shifting. Or even space shifting, so limited librarying. Where they draw the line is you're not supposed to redistribute it commercially.
Right.
Now, that is more observed in practice than necessarily in the law. So that it has now become accepted that if you make a copy, if you videotape something and you stick it on your shelf and then you watch it later, and then somebody wants to sue the VCR maker, they're not going to actually name you as a defendant in this case. They're going to name the manufacturer of the device. So when you see like the remote DVR case, where it's a famous case from a couple of years ago, where Cablevision, instead of having the DVR chip in your home, it's now going to be at Cablevision's offices. And Cablevision has to make a copy in order to get it onto your dedicated part of the server and then subsequently deliver it to your house. So that action of making a copy to redistribute it to their own servers, the content owners were trying to say that constitutes a copy, and a copy that you're not allowed to make. And you're also then redistributing it to your users. They specifically didn't name the individual users, or they didn't even consider the individual customers as infringers because they don't want to sue their own customers.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you're not going to get sued as an individual. You've essentially got a fair use excuse under Sony v. Universal saying that making a copy for your own personal use does not constitute an infringement. However, you are making an unauthorized copy.
But we're circumventing the protection essentially on the DVD.
Circumventing the protection is a different issue. I mean, it's hard to imagine that first of all, nobody's going to come after you in your home. Like obviously you know that. So is the theory there?
And why do I need all those guns?
The theory is though that in cracking the DVR, you're making a copy you're not supposed to make.
So the
DVD.
There was you may know the name of this company. There's a hilarious attempt to circumvent the result of that case, where a company recently said, I want to do the same thing and I want to compete with Netflix. And what they actually did, because they believed they could not copy the data, is they bought thousands of DVD players and DVDs, and they had them basically running. And if you subscribed, they would stream off of the original DVD. And they basically, we bought a bunch of commercially available things. We have rights to them. We've made no copies. You have no argument. They were shut down. I'm not sure on what grounds, but they attempted to.
Yeah, I think that was Streamcast, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, you also have Aereo, which is doing that, but with live TV.
TV broadcast.
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty big case right now, Aereo. It's a whole bunch of content distributors suing Aereo and another company that's got a name like Aereo. And some of the guys on the Aereo side, not to say the individuals, but some of the people involved in that movement are trying to needle the content distributors a little bit. They're trying to say, haha, we figured this out. We're going to put
these guys, they put a bunch of antennas.
The antennas are like the size of a dime.
Yeah. And
they live in, that building across the street. And they essentially provide you DVR services using broadcast medium instead of media that they get from the cable pipe, the kinds of things that you get in your current DVR.
They get it over the air. And so when you sign up for their service, you get your own personal antenna.
Yeah, they dedicate this little antenna.
And it's like your antenna. And so you have every right to pluck off the air broadcast and to do things like time shift them.
Yeah. And so the broadcast networks are like, well, gee, we're not pumping this stuff out into the air so that you can circumvent our cable contract. That really hurts us. So they're all upset about it. Their part of their argument is that it's part of the public trust. But my recollection is that they had a preliminary injunction attempt and it failed.
Yeah.
So the Aereo gets to continue to exist. I believe Barry Diller is behind Aereo. So Aereo's got a lot of money on its side. Everybody expects that this kind of a thing will work out somehow in contract and not go all the way to the Supreme Court and have somebody, get shut down. But that, in fact, Aereo is providing some version of a valuable service, and that the content distributors just want to have a piece of it. They're saying that they're entitled to a piece of it, and Aereo is saying, no, you're not. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how that thing unfolds. But that's a huge case.
So wait, I want to get us back on track. So you said the anti-circumvention. The technological means of anti-circumvention have to be kind of re-examined every once in a while.
Yeah, and so recently they re-examined it and they hit a bunch of different subjects. I'm looking at my notes right here, but there were new exemptions that were announced, I think, in October. So ebook reading assisted technologies, literary works distributed electronically.
Ebook reading assisted, that's the Amazon Kindle being able to read a thing out loud to you.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
which got shut down originally.
Well, they they have announced new exemptions to the anti-circumvention rule. Right.
Yeah,
so now we're doing double negatives, right? Yeah. So we're saying that you're not allowed to crack stuff,
but
unless
you are
one of these 5 situations.
Okay.
So it's ebook reading assistive technologies.
Okay. So if you're blind, you can have your ebook reader read something to you, even though that content was not quote unquote licensed for audiobooks.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's number 1. There are 5 of them. Number 2 is that you're allowed to jailbreak smartphones for apps, computer programs on wireless telephone handsets to enable interoperability of software applications. So it's essentially jailbreaking.
So jailbreaking's allowed.
Yeah. Unlocking old smartphones to switch providers. So computer programs on wireless handsets that were acquired within 90 days of the effective date of the exemption, which is January 2013, so it's this month, for the purpose of connecting to alternative networks, which is unlocking.
Awesome.
So they said that's okay
But
for smartphones.
Old, what does it mean by old phones?
Prior to 90 days, acquired within 90 days of the effective date of the exemption, and essentially old phones. Number 4 was audiovisual works, certain fair uses. So motion pictures on DVDs are distributed by online services for the purposes of criticism or comment in non-commercial videos, documentary films, nonfiction multimedia, ebooks offering film analysis, and for certain educational uses by college and university facility and students in kindergarten through 12th grade educators. So they went.
It sounds like a
very
making
specific
a lot of the
about
fair use a lot more explicit than it really is under the fair use doctrine.
Yes, but it's saying not only is it a fair use to do these sorts of things, and you can expect that if someone does in fact circumvent the technology intended to protect copyright, that they will also be subject to fair use analysis. If it's not fair use, it's probably not subject to the exemption either.
This was the case of like, I think like professors want to show a little clip from a DVD in their class, and they own the DVD and they had every right to show it, and it was clearly allowed by fair use. It was physically impossible. There were technological reasons that were preventing them from doing this.
That's basically the notion. I mean, also, but if you're thinking about you want to play a clip in your PowerPoint presentation or whatever, in theory, you would have to crack the DVD to get to that video. And now it's saying, it's okay. Yeah. And it seems sort of anticipatory also that like, look, there are things we don't know about how people are next going to want to use their content.
Right.
And so we're going to allow you to figure out
how to solve the problem. Unusual. That we got a good law out of Congress.
Perhaps. Well, you'll see. There are some things that they did not address that they could have that you might think, it's not so principled that they didn't do it. And then audiovisual works assistive technology. So it's the same thing as what we were talking about with ebook assistive technologies. Motion pictures and other audiovisual works on DVDs or distributed by online services for the purpose of research to create DVD players capable of rendering captions, descriptive audio for persons who are blind, visually impaired, and as you can imagine, they're open-ended about what kinds of impairments these things are intended to address.
It sounds like there's some,
because it leaves open the door for, a lot of people are creative in figuring out how to create assistive technologies. It could be assistive technologies for the autistic that we haven't even conceived of yet.
That's right.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
What they did not address
that are offended by sex in movies, for example, you could cut out all the sex scenes.
For example.
And then that particular disability that they have.
Yeah, I want how they define disability. The things that they did not address, though, they did not address the jailbreaking and unlocking of tablets. So they made a distinction between a smartphone and a tablet.
Interesting.
And then moving audiovisual works.
My smartphone is just really, really large.
For example. And then moving audiovisual works from DVD to tablets is also not exempted. So those are places where people were lobbying to say, well, gee, I should be able to do that. I should be able to do what Jay is talking about. I bought the DVD. I want to see it on my tablet. Seems like it's a fair use, if we're saying that under Sony, it's generally a fair use for Jay to be allowed to do what he did. And the law is still saying, no, that's still an anti-circumvention issue. So that's obviously part of the content owners.
What was that company that eventually got shut down for providing a tool that was it DivX?
DivX had it. No,
it was a DVD. It was a DVD
Real
ripping.
Networks tried to do
Napster.
Nah, there was one that was specifically a DVD ripping product. It might be DivX.
Yeah, no, Real Networks tried to put out one.
Yeah,
and they got shut down before they could even get it out the door.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So those were the new things that came down in October, and those get evaluated every couple of years.
Okay. Well, thanks, Britt.
Yeah, you bet.
So your copyright update number 1 on the Next Stage podcast brought to you, but unfortunately was just walking by, and otherwise the rest of this podcast is going to be awful.
Tune in again in 3 years when we hear the next set of changes.
Thanks, Britton. Is there anything I should point them to on the web that they should go look at if they want to learn more about you or whatever? Anything you want me to promote right now?
No, not in particular.
I was just looking at BrittonPayne.com, but it's a little bit out of date.
Slightly out of date. That's more for my cartoon work. Yeah, but on LinkedIn, and you could go to on Meetup. I run a startup called Startups Building a New Foundation. It's essentially startup law for non-lawyers.
That's really cool. Abby will link to that in the show notes.
Great.
And that's a BrittonPayne, just for all the other people who will try to spell it like the country. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
See you later, Britt.
Good to see you, Brett.
And okay.
We had more facts and content in that portion of the podcast than we've had in the entire time I've been here.
Yeah, that was really all right. Now we're just going to have to talk about
Siberian Husky puppies and pudding.
Pudding. That's right. And something I'm thinking something with Hello Kitty. I don't know quite what yet, but I'll come up with something. So what else is going on in the Stack Exchange universe, Jay and David? We just had the holidays.
Oh, but only in the Stack Exchange universe.
That's right. We have
this thing here at Stack Exchange called the holidays.
So we had Winter Bash over the holidays.
Oh yeah,
on almost all the sites.
How did it go?
Not the entire network. It went really well. It's ending today.
Do we have any stats on hats?
You're just waiting for that one. You can still go to winterbad.sh.
Winterbad. Hold on, I'm going.
And there you can see all the hats that we had, minus the secret hats. And the people really enjoyed it. There's a meta post where Arthi was asking for feedback, and everyone.
Did you guys all find the?
We haven't done the actual stat analysis yet.
The absolutely amazing. What's the word I'm looking for? Hidden Easter egg in the snow at winterbot.sh.
They did. Somebody did finally find that by basically decoding the code that deobfuscating the code that Ben.
I believe what you do is you hold down. I'm going to tell everybody.
You can go ahead and tell because it's on meta. So
you go to winterba.sh and there's snow there, and then you move your mouse around the snow while you're holding the control key, and you'll sort of create this little gravitational pull, which you can use to collect snowflakes. But you have to be careful because they'll sort of get away from you if you try to move too fast or anything like that. And what you do is you sort of swoop around. You collect most of the snowflakes, and then something happens, which I will tell you about as soon as I accomplish it.
It takes a while.
It does take about 10
minutes.
You
have to go on for about 5 minutes longer than you think you should, way past where you're convinced nothing is actually
First,
going to happen.
First, you need to leave work and get a babysitter.
Get a babysitter.
The other alternative that's been proposed is just put your cell phone on the control key and walk away for 5 minutes and then come back.
No, you really want to collect most of the snowflakes, and if you move slowly around, sweeping them up, it'll happen faster. And then amazing things happen.
Just hold control the entire time and collect snowflakes.
Wow, geez, I almost dropped them.
You'll get there eventually.
This is really amazingly fun.
Just like this podcast.
So now Joel has 43 snowflakes. 43. I think he's about to get. No, he's dropped a couple. They kind of fall off.
Okay.
So that's the Easter egg. You can try it for yourself. Joel's still trying it, so we'll just keep talking while he works on that. Yeah. You can tell how long it takes by.
So Winter Bash, great fun was had by all. How many hats?
You can see how many hats were awarded. So Stack Overflow had 60,000 hats awarded, and that's only to people on Stack Overflow. We had the different thing where you had to opt in and before you started getting hats and seeing.
That's
hats.
Insane. 60,000 people even opted in and got hats.
Yeah, so it was quite a few. Well, not 60,000 people.
60,000
hats. So if they earned an average of 10 each, then less. But
so and John Skeet probably took 4,000 for himself.
Well, there weren't that many hats. No, the most anybody earned I think was 20 hats, maybe 20 and a couple. But so that was Winter Bash. So and this was really we just did it mostly for fun.
This is really taking a long time to get every single snowflake.
You're still doing the snowflakes.
It's like 5 that I haven't gotten yet.
There were some secret hats that I think they were all found by various people. The secret epic Punyan beard.
Oh, there was the Punyan hat.
The Punyan beard, yeah.
So a couple things to know about Punyan. First of all, he had a baby, right?
Correct.
You want to report on that?
That is correct.
It's important that be true for the rest of this story.
Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Secondly, that he is in a rock band. We didn't really know this.
Not a rock band, a jazz band.
Jazz and disco, really classic disco.
I call them all new music.
The disco was from my high school era, and I'm older than anybody in the company.
Classical and new music.
So we had a holiday party at the what was that place? It was a hotel in the Lower East Side.
Rivington?
Yeah.
Hotel Rivington. Rivington Hotel.
The hotel on Rivington, on Rivington
the
Street.
Waldorf
in
Rivington.
And
we were in the penthouse.
Which was amazing. It was like 3 stories. It was like big floor-to-ceiling glass windows with ridiculous view of Manhattan. Really fun. And there's absolutely astonishing music of the 70s. 1978, really, to be specific. The year of disco. And a little bit of 79. Not so much Michael Jackson. I didn't hear any Michael Jackson, but
not a lot of MJ.
All that, the Saturday Night Fever stuff, and it was Jason's band,
and they were awesome.
Wait, that was Jason's band?
Yeah,
he played with them. His dad is in the band. His uncle. It was like a bunch of Punions.
Which, frankly, sounds just a little bit like nepotism to me.
But anyway, he also was doing this thing before he had the baby called a baby beard, which I'd never heard of before. But I guess it's a thing where you just don't shave for the 9 months that your baby is growing.
This is ridiculous. I have every single snowflake, and I still don't.
There may be a bug. There's one bug that Ben is aware of that he doesn't care to fix because this is all going away in a few days. But
it doesn't work wonderfully on Safari.
So, and that Jay has been really bent out of shape about that the entire time.
No, I'm fine with it. I'm totally fine with it. Just commenting
you can tell
in case
from
that's the problem.
From how he says it.
So anyway, he had this ridiculous looking beard.
Ridiculous beard.
I mean, it was like is it offensive to say that it was an Amish beard?
It was an atrocity.
It's offensive to Amish people, I think.
Yeah. It was. I think they
it's
kind
like
of trim it or comb it. It doesn't have quite as much pizza in it, generally.
It's a terrible beard.
You mean the Amish ones have less pizza?
So anyway, then the day that his child was born, he shaved it all off, not just the beard, but the hair as well, and went totally bald and looked kind of equally ridiculous on the other end.
Yeah, he sort of went from being animal on the Muppets to being Beaker.
Yeah, it's a bald baby is generally adorable. A bald Punion is
Beaker wasn't the bald one. It was Beaker's the other guy was
Honeydew.
Beaker's, is that his name?
That's right.
Honeydew.
He was the other
Honeydew.
scientist.
Professor Honeydew.
Okay, I believe you.
Thank you.
Really?
Yeah. But anyway, in honor of this epic shaving,
he kind of looked like, what was
Ben
that show?
created the
Not
epic
the baby, not the mama.
Yeah, that was the dinosaurs show. I know.
Dinosaurs. Yeah.
What was
Sherman
that the name of the
Helmsley?
show?
Sherman Helmsley was in that show, I think.
It was puppets.
Yeah, dinosaur. But Sherman Helmsley was one of the lead voices, I believe.
Oh.
I don't know who that is.
What?
So anyway, the epic Punion beard was just a joke based on the epic Punion shave.
So that was one of the hats you could win during the winter.
No, it was only ever awarded to employees and I think 2 people on Meta just to throw everyone off and confuse them.
No, I think they figured out the cause, and I think everyone figured out the cause was they on Meta. Those guys who awarded it had determined what the epic Punion beard was about.
Yeah, but
because there is justice, and we would not award it
right.
arbitrarily.
It certainly wasn't arbitrary.
Yeah,
they figured out the secret. So keep looking for the next. By the time this comes out, it'll be over. Next year. So the epic Punion beard looks like you're being swallowed by a hair shark.
Ew.
Pretty awesome.
I hope to never again hear the phrase hair shark.
Hair shark. I want a hair shark t-shirt.
That would be the scariest Japanese horror movie ever made.
The most uncomfortable and simultaneously most fashionable t-shirt you could wear.
So that was Winter Bash. By the time you hear this podcast, it'll all be over.
We're
but
crossing that off.
There may be something next year. Stay tuned for another year.
We have a couple of new sites to talk about. We got an anime site and a politics site. How's the politics site doing?
It's still there.
It's doing all right. They each have about a little over 250 questions, so they're doing all right in terms of just numbers. As far as quality, I'll let you take a look and be the judge.
Why don't British kings and queens veto laws? Well,
that one was actually kind of interesting.
For
I read that one. I enjoyed that question.
Yes.
I think that the politics side is interesting. I think it falls into a category where I do think there are enough questions about politics, the political process, that are really have sort of fact-based, expertise-based answers that it really could be a very interesting site. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing some of that and some good representation of that. I do think it's got a challenge. It's like if you had a site about like how to be the world's most effective arguer, right? And how to really win like contentious debates.
Yeah.
There's all this stuff you can ask questions about, and there's the Harvard negotiation method, and there's how to talk to kids so they'll listen and listen so they'll talk, and all these different things you could actually write about.
You just sort of hurt their feelings in a way that makes them cry, and then you kind of win.
That's really after the beatings don't work. Well, we digress. We have a parenting site for all that. But I think what you'd get, the problem is, while there are all those expertise-based things, what you're still going to have is a lot of people who really enjoy getting together and arguing.
Yeah.
And so I think the challenge on politics...
They enjoy rhetoric.
Right.
This is a rhetoric site without rhetoric.
Right. So there are some great questions, but what we also see is there's I think naturally people who are passionate about politics are usually not passionate about politics because they enjoy a dispassionate analysis of the political process they're super into.
Right.
That's
they
true.
tend to be in some way, I think, very enthusiastically partisan.
Go team.
Right. And while we have, I think, a lot of people working very hard to try and take that interest and channel it into these more fact-based questions, it's definitely a site where I think there's a risk that there is so much sort of positional interest.
I think the people in politics they've somehow convinced themselves that politics is a world in which there are no right answers and we need to present both sides, and that's the way to be fair. There is no such thing as like, let's just take, are there actual truths here underlying some of this?
Well, there are truthy questions that are being asked on there. I mean, there's some stuff that's there is ground truth. It's just not a lot of the stuff that people want to ask.
It's
very hard to know what the real truth is, and both sides tend to have their own version of the truth that they will argue for.
This site will succeed only if it can come up with kind of a new way of talking about politics that doesn't really exist anywhere, because that's sort of the idea of Stack Exchange, is this idea that we're not about opinions. Which actually leads us on to some of the closed reasons, which we're not going to talk about this week. But
one thing that was talked about on the site a bit, and I think at least initially was, I don't say rejected, but wasn't embraced enough to do anything about yet, was there was some talk about taking a skeptics-like approach where, because of the sort of partisan positional nature of the topic, they should try to enforce a sort of strict, answers must be sourced in some way and refer to facts elsewhere.
But I mean, you can have debates. You could have pure political debate, and it's all sourced. Like you could go to the most rabid right-wing or left-wing blog about politics, and they'll source things up the wazoo by just quoting some other right-wing person saying exactly what they thought, or quoting some completely ridiculous so-called survey or anecdote. I mean, sourcing as a means of providing a fig leaf for your arguments is a standard part and parcel of all political opinion.
It's like those guys in Times Square,
about that.
right, who do like the crazy. I think they're still there.
Are you talking about the naked cowboy?
No, we're always talking about the naked cowboy.
You're talking about the America with a K people?
I think they're called Black Israelites, and they do this like the white American man came and murdered everyone, and then the world started over. And they go, preach on, and then someone reads a quote from the Bible that actually kind of in and of itself seems to suggest that sort of thing.
Hebrew Israelites, I believe.
Hebrew Israelites, I think. But they have a style of presentation.
Neither Hebrew nor Israelites.
But no, I don't think a style of presentation that is sort of someone says a seemingly outrageous statement, and then someone else, because it actually creates a little more of a sense of like, this is very trustworthy. A different person is reading this from a well-known book, takes a couple of quotes out of context that would seem to support the point.
But we have to go well beyond that. I mean, for our politics site to work, it has to actually find a new way of talking about political things. And so where it makes sense is, and this is something I said a long time ago. I totally forgot about this, but somebody asked if we could have a political site. And I said, we could, but it would have to have a criterion that if the answer would be different for let's say, a Democrat versus a Republican, then it's not going to work on the site. In other words, you can only really ask things where there is an answer that people would tend to both agree upon, which is not saying this is going to be the subset of politics where everybody agrees, which is saying this is about at least agreeing to get a common fact-based environment in which people can draw their own conclusions about what the politics.
It's a very hard. Almost nothing passes that test, I think. It's very hard.
That's not true. If you say, for example, there was a question on there that. Let's look at the questions that are on there right now. One of them is whether the legalization of marijuana in Colorado and Washington is constitutional. And the answer is, well, it sort of depends on how the Commerce Clause is interpreted. That's something that whether you are pro marijuana legalization or against it, and whether you are pro states' rights or against it, you would tend to agree on the facts that are stated there. Now, if you were highly partisan, you would find ways of disagreeing with the facts. But reasonable men.
It's important, though, your answer...
Excuse my sexist language there.
Your answer is it depends, though, in that case. And that makes it easier to take
reasonable humans.
If the answer were not, it depends. If someone said, according to any reasonable interpretation of this clause in the Constitution, it is not constitutional, I think what you'd have is, in an answer that was less wishy-washy, it's reasonable to think, if we take a clearer question, there's a very similar one as the Patriot Act constitutional, a good guess is almost all Republicans, that's not fair, but many Republicans, the majority are going to say yes, and the majority of Democrats are going to say no.
No, but you got to give reasons, and actually that one is that's not a very good question on the site, honestly.
I think it was actually I think it was closed temporarily, once it's been reopened.
But there are better ones, like which states give proportional electoral college votes to candidates? That's easy. Is it allowed to protest peacefully against the government on certain issues in India? That one's a little bit too broad, but I would say, specifically, like what are the, peaceful protests in India, specifically what laws apply and how are they applied? You could ask, these very sort of clinical questions where, kind of both sides could say, all right, let's agree that the facts are X.
I think I kind of don't mind the "it depends" answer, because as long as it's telling you something new. So like for the Patriot Act or the one we were just looking at, right? The I like the answer of "it depends on how you interpret this."
Oh no, I actually love answers.
Because then at least I've learned something, and the answer is really "it depends," and each side would interpret it differently. So I think that's actually interesting, and I think that the big thing that the site has going for it is that while it's a very difficult subject to approach, it's not hard to cross the bar of better than whatever else is out there.
That's true.
Because this doesn't have to be the perfect politics site. It just has to be a little bit better than everything else out there, which is not that hard.
If we can keep it actually with a feeling that this is like a little bit smarter, a little bit less partisan, and a little bit more concerned with facts and less concerned with opinion than anything else you find out there, it's going to be actually kind of amazing. And intelligent, smart people will all sort of flock to it.
Yeah.
For there's a group of sort of independent mind thinkers, and there's a lot of them. People like the most public one I would say is Andrew Sullivan, who actually make an appearance of attempting to figure things out based on first principles and not based on their immediate partisan urges, where they just sort of have a compulsion to jump to one particular political view based on their team or party, but they're actually trying to figure things out. And I think people in that category might find it very appealing to be able to make up their mind on issues based on facts. So we have great hope for the politics.stackexchange.com. Visit it, make an account, ask some questions, and get banned.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other new site is the anime site.
Anime.
I don't know how much we have to say about that, since probably none of us know very much about anime. Maybe Jay does.
Well, the top question might be helpful to us. It starts with, what differentiates anime from regular cartoons?
Oh, please delete. That's really the top question?
No, it's just I should say the most. It's just the first question I encountered on the site.
No, see, that's not the kind of question we want to have. I like the questions like, does Sao Tome Ranma talk like a member of the Yakuza? There's a good question.
We think.
I think so, because it's it's specific. There's an answer.
Anyway, the one good thing that this site has going for it is that I don't understand half of the questions on the homepage.
Exactly.
And that's often a good sign for a site like this that's very niche.
It's actually not a terrible question at all, because people are having trouble answering it. So I think, in fact, what differentiates anime is it's a more interesting question than it sounds like. It sounds,
because you can only have 5 questions like that, and then it's over.
Yeah, no,
that's
we don't
not
have a
something
site made up of them.
experts would ever ask.
I'm just saying what they are drilling a little bit down into is, we all know it when we see it, but it's hard for us to put our finger on exactly what it is that makes the definitional difference, which is an interesting, I think.
But this is if you were an anime fanatic and you walked into a room full of people talking about anime, and one of them was sitting there saying, "What exactly is anime?" You'd be like, "Oh God."
I don't know.
No,
but
I
I'd see being interested in that
wrong
question.
room.
If you're really passionate about anime and someone's like, "Oh, it's just cartoons," you're going to have an impassioned defense of why it's not the same as a cartoon and what's different about it.
If you were David, C# versus Objective-C, what exactly? Which is better, really?
That's different. If somebody were asking this, which of these anime is bigger or better?
Should I become a programmer?
If somebody said programming is just typing, it's just a glorified word
really
processor.
Typing, or is it like?
I would say no. You're wrong.
How does programming differ from graphic design? Really? That's like, okay, it's not that you're going to be bored by that conversation. It's just that is not a place where there are experts.
I don't agree.
I think this is in the category of when we had the AI site, and the first questions were like, "What book should I read to learn about AI?" What are some blogs about AI?
I'm glad you mentioned AI.
What is AI?
No. The question is, it's more like on the AI site saying, what exactly is the line that most people would consider? What are the characteristics between a robot and a machine?
Yeah.
And that is it is sort of an interesting question that a robotics expert, like, I can't instantly say, so a coffee maker is not a robot.
All can, because that's such a first-year freshman, it's a first week of school question.
I don't think so.
So what's the answer?
But this is anime is different. I mean,
I don't think it is. We're just
yes,
not
it is,
in
because
there.
these aren't people who make anime. These are people who watch anime.
These are geeks.
Yeah, they're anime geeks. That's okay.
Believe me, it's not going to be a place for them to debate.
It doesn't matter. It's one question asked early on. It may get an answer. It may not. Do not go into the site and delete their question.
Deleted. Do I have a little diamond on there? Let's find out.
Do not go.
Just
leave it alone, Joel.
Fear not, anime community. We've suspended Joel Spolsky for 7 days to cool down.
I want to log on.
So those are the new sites.
I want to log on. I clicked log on. Jenny, are we fixing that? David?
So
you know how you go to log
just
on
for
to a
you,
site
we're
and
gonna.
It says, do you want to log on? And
well, that's because it's automatically logging you in.
No. I clicked log on, and then I logged on, and
it says, "Do you want to create an account?"
No, it said,
Joel, if you could send an email to team@stackoverflow.com.
No, OpenID.stackexchange.com was asking me if I want to allow.
Well, that's because our OpenID provider is acting like it's a standalone OpenID provider that knows nothing about Stack Exchange.
Yeah.
And so the same thing that Google does when you go to Google and Google's like, this site wants to know about you.
You see, this is...
I know. I agree. It's weird. It's because we decided to implement this as a standalone OpenID provider that we were going to open source because everybody in the world is going to use it.
Because it's going to be the future. Is this going to be fixed? Is it even on the list?
I'm glad you asked. I meant to mention this to you, David. I actually added to our project roadmap in cross-site integration last week.
Okay.
Well, that's a different thing. But yeah,
Well,
I want to. Yes, we're going to try to erase as many of the distinctions between. Basically, you shouldn't have to know about OpenID Stack Exchange in order to log in with your email and password. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of having email password login.
Yay! When did Saga wear his pants? In episode 71 of Saint Say I can't pronounce it. Well, he is sort of pantless here.
oh wow.
Okay, so anyway,
There's sort of an artistic shadow
this
there.
took a strange turn.
Thanks for tuning in.
Okay, anime. I can check that
I
one
can't
off.
look away
Christmas
from
party,
Saga. He's wearing no pants.
Talked about that. We got a new office. Alex, any news on the new office?
Nope. Just
Construction.
it's building.
We're moving in the middle of March. We're going to have this new amazing office. It's going to be gigantic. It's going to have hexagon-shaped offices. That's the main thing I keep telling people about. But it's really like the espresso bar and the big. And Stack Overflow TV. We should talk about.
Wait, what?
We're going to have a thing called.
That's a glimmer in Joel's eye right now.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of things are that way.
We're going to have our new office space.
Joe's figured out the TV problem, and he's going to try and launch it ahead of Apple.
No, incorrect. Our new office space has a lunchroom, which, if you take out the tables and just move in a bunch of chairs, can actually seat like 160 people, right?
Yeah.
A good number?
That's roughly what we think.
So we're going to have events all the time that are going to be mostly after-work events, like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, technical tutorials and lectures and that kind of stuff on programming topics. Hopefully, as often as we possibly can. My goal is to have them at least 3 or 4 a week, but eventually, but at scale. But in the beginning, maybe just one every couple of weeks, and we'll broadcast them for you. We're going to have a full studio thingamajiggy going on there, so we can broadcast them on the internet, and that's going to be stackoverflow.tv, and that's just sort of waiting for the new office. So if you have any ideas,
we should probably buy that domain before someone else goes and does it.
Yeah, I assigned this to producer Alex.
StackOverflow.tv.
We might already have it.
No, we don't.
But I'm going to ask.
Yes, it's the Stack Overflow.
You never know. Sam gets
tuberculosis
drunk
site.
and buys domain names.
That's true.
What did he buy?
It was something very strange. I don't remember.
All right.
It was
We'll
something
put it
about
in the show notes.
it was like prison coders. There was
New
like
office. Check. Now, the next thing on my note says interesting meth questions.
Meta.
Meta. That's better. Okay. Far less interesting.
I think you wanted to recap one episode of Breaking Bad, and then we're going to switch over to Meta.
I'm sorry.
So I found a few interesting questions. So if you actually pull up the Trello board, you can find the question, or I can read the number. So the first one: how to deal with a highly voted non-constructive question, which is meta.stackoverflow.com/q/160969.
16969. I saw a question like, how can I make a redirect page in jQuery? This question has got more than 1,000 upvotes. What happened to the same question is asked now? Comment, what have you tried? Downvote, closed by 10 people. What are we supposed to do with that kind of question, which does not show any efforts by the OP? Should we leave the question alone only because of an answer? Is that not just a dupe?
Well, so the example the guy gave is not a very good example because it's not really anything that would get closed as non-constructive. He's sort of whining. Just because he's like, well, if I ask this question, it would get downvoted and closed because it's just kind of like
how to make a
it's
redirect
only one
page
line.
in jQuery would get.
Oh,
It's
wait,
one
I think I
line.
answered this question.
Yeah, you answered it, and I thought your answer was interesting, which is why I thought this was interesting to talk about.
But you answered the.
Jay answered this one.
Oh,
I forgot. I answered.
is it helping or hurting? Yeah.
So well, one point that he's making is just that we're much harsher on these types of questions now, or at least we're certainly harsher on them if a new user asks
the question.
them.
Oh, because it's too easy?
What's the
Because it's
question
one
number?
line.
I feel like I'm Joel. What's the
What
question?
do you mean
number?
it's one line? So what?
Well,
160969.
the very old question. Got 1,000 upvotes.
It shows
so-
no efforts by the OP.
Well, right. So
Meaning the person is just like, how do I do it? That's actually, to be specific, it's not necessarily actually what happened because this question was edited quite a bit.
Well, but he's complaining about today. But he's basically, I think his basic beef is here's a question that we all agree is not an ideal, awesome question, and perhaps shouldn't even be on the site. And here it is with a jillion upvotes. And
But that's because it's a shockingly useful question for the internet.
Yeah,
because
it
lots of people have
actually
this
is a
question.
good question.
well, right. And that was my point was basically that there's two key concerns with a question like this, right? So one is if we think it's easy or problematic or bad, The first question is it going to help people or not? Is it going to help someone? And in this case, I think the answer is it's helping a lot of people, because while the question has sort of a flaw in it, which is it's kind of saying, how do I do this wrong way? And someone's basically saying, well, if you had to do it within those wrong confines you've set up, one answer explains how. And someone else says, you shouldn't do it that way at all, right? You should use this totally different method.
Yeah.
Which is good. Those are helpful answers. Right?
Yeah, a lot of questions. Okay, so there's a bunch of issues going on here. So let's throw away the issue of, okay, there's a syndrome. We need a name for this syndrome where somebody says, how do I do X? And somebody says, don't do X, do Y.
Swine flu.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the right name for that.
I just think it's a good syndrome name.
Syndrome. I see. What do we want to call that? We call that unasking the question or
pivoting.
Pivoting?
It's a pivot.
It is kind of a pivot.
Don't do that, do this.
If this, then this other thing.
Answering a question with a don't do that, do some other thing.
Then don't do that.
Pivoting. Let's call it pivoting. Okay, so the pivoting syndrome is quite popular. And the reason it happens a lot is that a lot of times when people are trying to do something, they're hitting their head against it, and they're only turning to Stack Overflow because they're hitting their head against the wall trying to do something that is not very easy, because you should be doing something else which is much easier and a better way to do it.
Right. I've been trying to clean my floor with my cat for 2 hours, and he's really not absorbing anything.
Right. And
is there a technique I should use
to get my cat?
Right. And so in some cases,
stay wet.
if you need to use a cat,
you should drug the cat, and you should probably get this particular kind of cat.
Right.
Well, the right answer is you should use a broom, right, is a better answer.
Or a mop. That's correct. Exactly. And then you're like, well, no, that's not what I asked. Yeah. Okay, so pivoting is actually an excellent way to answer questions. It's fairly common. We have no problem with that. And in fact, both answers are legit. If you want to provide both the in situ answer and in fact, because of pivoting, that's one reason we encourage people not to say, how do I get my cat to stand still while I scrape him across the floor? But give us some background.
Right. I'm trying to clean my floor.
Cleaning your floor. Right. And that this is happening, because then we
I don't have a broom. All I have is a cat.
Underlying problem.
And as luck would have it, I've never liked the cat.
But then the answer is like, do you have some little
$5
you can sprinkle around the floor, and maybe the cat will lick your entire floor clean
if you break its legs. It'll kind of squirm around.
I don't think either of you should be either on our floor cleaning site or our cat care
Well, anyway,
site.
I think what happened to this question was fine. So what happened here is exactly what should happen, right? The first answer is don't do that, do this. And the second answer is, okay, if that's really what you wanted, here's how to do it. But it's also kind of a very simple, basic question.
But here's one reason. There's several reasons why this question is not so good. One is it's a very, very easy question, or it's a very, very common thing. It's the kind of thing that if you Googled, you would find it in all the reference manuals, presumably. But
I'm sure if you Google it now, you'll find us.
Right. But lo and behold, this person did not actually find it. And I don't think it's the end of the world if somebody asks the question, creates a sort of a new canonical entry on the internet that answers a question really, really well that had already existed somewhere else on the internet. We're not attempting, there's no rule that says that there can only be one source of all forms of knowledge in the entire universe, and that Stack Exchange is never, ever allowed to have any questions and answers if the answer exists anywhere else in the universe.
And I think in a question like this, where there is a false premise, so it's not like there's a great blog post on this. Yeah. The answer probably exists in a dozen places, but most of them are going to be discussion boards. And I'd actually argue in that case, a question where it's not, if it's different, there's a Wikipedia entry that totally nails it, fine, a good source. Right. If the answer is mostly on discussion boards, and this is a great example of that because there's a sort of an error in the assumption, then us having it's better. It's an improvement. So on a discussion board, the right answer's there.
Is locked in bad software.
Right. There's 8 bad answers around it. I got to check them all out.
That's what we call trapped in bad software.
Right. On our site, I know that the top answer, or in this case, 2 answers, are almost certainly right.
Right. So anyway, what Null Pointer said in asking the particular question is, what are we supposed to do with that kind of question which does not show any efforts by the OP? So this is a case where the person asking the question did, and actually, if you look at the original version of the question, it was sort of broken English. It was this is not a person that was trying very hard.
Yeah, and I touched on that because my take is I think there's 2 big questions. A question like this, there's 2 things I'm testing for. So one is, does it help people? And we've agreed yes. The second, I think, is there simply not enough effort put in by the OP? But when we ask that question, what we're really concerned about generally, I think, and my answer focuses on is an effort imbalance. We don't like someone to come in and say, I typed half a sentence and didn't proofread it. Now, please give me back 2 paragraphs that you have to work really hard at to help me.
And do my homework.
Because our community will resent it. They'll get frustrated. Yeah. And what I said in this case, it's not to disparage the people who give very good answers, but in this case, he asked a legitimate question without a ton of effort or extra work to kind of make it great, but the answers didn't require a massive amount of work. An easy redirection or question by someone that took him probably a couple of minutes did a great job of helping him and other people. And so what I'd say in this case is I actually think, while he didn't put a huge amount of effort into his question, it didn't take a huge effort to answer it. And so there's not a great harm done.
There's no asymmetry.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'd say,
and in fact, any more effort into the question would just have obfuscated it. So what he's created now is a very canonical source on the internet for a very specific problem that lots of people are having. And for him to put 2 paragraphs explaining all the other bogus crap that he was doing with cauliflower right before he had this problem,
cauliflower's to calm the cat down.
Yeah. would only have made the question actually more cluttered and useless.
Right.
If your question is very simple and only needs 1 sentence to express with utter clarity, then go ahead, do it 1 sentence.
And so at the end of the day, what I'd say is everything about this is actually not only not terrible, it's overall helping the world. There's one thing that is a little bit out of whack, which is not much to do about, which is this question, the quality and the effort and the sort of complexity of the question and its answers probably don't necessarily want for hundreds and hundreds of upvotes. But that problem is, I actually think, is a bike shed problem. It's a question that everyone can relate to. So it has a disproportionate number of votes for its sort of overall interestingness. But the question is good. It's just overvoted. And that's not a huge disaster.
What happened, David, something I noticed is that if you look at the Twitter feed, there are automatically generated Twitter feeds.
Yeah.
A lot of times they identify questions that are just super easy, where a lot of people know the answer. Like, there's something about, if you go onto the Unix site and you ask a question of like, how do I take the output of one command and then pipe it into the input of another command? You'll get lots and lots of upvotes, you get hundreds of answers. Whatever our algorithm is for the newsletter and the Twitter feed and stuff like that, it'll be like, hey, this question looks super interesting.
It's a really hard problem to find, because that is an interesting question, right? What you see is, if people see that question and they, on the list of questions on the homepage, they think,
click,
I know that,
because I can answer it.
And they read it, and they read the answer, and they think, that's a good answer, upvote it.
Yeah.
And that's a good question, upvote it. And
but
so
it
gets a lot of upvotes. It gets a lot of upvotes on the question, it gets a lot of upvotes on the answer, it gets a lot of views.
But solely because it's shockingly easy.
But it's bike shed. It's a straight, have we talked about this on the podcast? It's the bike shed.
What is a bike shed?
Bike shed, and I don't think it means what you think it means.
No, it's the bike shed problem, isn't it?
Bike shed is when we want to argue about whether what color the bike shed should be, because we don't understand the nuclear power plant.
Right. But that's the point, is everyone understands what a bike shed is, so everyone is comfortable weighing in and participating. So a question like this, you go, it's too easy. Why does it have all these upvotes? That's why it has all these upvotes, is everyone who reads it understands the question and can say, yes, this is a legitimate question. Yes, this is a legitimate answer. So instead of the 3% of people who understand whatever the heck John Skeet was writing about in some question voting, everyone who reads it votes, because they can almost all get it. Yeah. And so, like the bike shed, unlike the
nuclear power
but it's also the
nuclear
views, it's also the clicks. And so the problem here, Joel, is that if we say, okay, exclude those, then what we're really saying is take out all the stuff that people like to click and show stuff that not very many people like to click because it's obscure.
That's why it's interesting. It seems like it takes some editorial judgment to actually come up with stuff that's actually going to teach you.
It's rare that you find something that didn't get a lot of clicks, didn't get a lot of upvotes, but is like a hidden gem. That's the stuff you want to promote, but that's hard to find.
Twitter feed for a site?
You go to Twitter.
Like how do I find out what
Twitter should really buy that twitter.com domain name so people don't have this problem.
I think we have a list. We have a link on the Stack Exchange list. We used to.
On stackexchange.com/sites. Wow, this is hard to find. No wonder nobody ever goes to our Twitter. Nobody ever follows us on Twitter.
Laura says it's on sites.
It's not, though. Oh, I see. They don't all have them. It is on sites. Thank you, Laura. Unix Twitter feed is Stack Unix. Okay, let's see what's on there. How to determine which SD splat is USB. How to manually install Linux on a USB. That's really popular. Why is the terminal case sensitive? That's really popular. It's not the worst thing in the world. They are relatively easy. It almost seems like a real human being editor would somehow come up with a slightly different.
Right. In theory, you'd almost want on a.
You want things that are surprising, not things that just confirm your knowledge you already had.
It gets trickier. It depends on how you think people are consuming the media, right? I'd actually think on the Twitter feed, what you almost want is you want some of the things in the feed to be those relatively broad connection ones. So most people will see something and then go, I had that problem once. I remember that. I solved it. It's neat they're asking questions like that. But that most of the time they're seeing new things that might be of interest to them now.
By the way, while we're on the podcast, we should encourage everybody to go subscribe to @StackExchange on Twitter. And you'll get the best of all of the different Twitter feeds fed to you, every 3 hours, I think. It's not very many. It's like you get like 5 or 6 interesting questions a day from all over the network.
I think that's a tough feed for most people.
Stack Exchange?
No, yeah, that particular one, I think the challenge you get a little bit because it's all or nothing, right? So that one's all the sites. The difficulty you get a little bit is for, I think, most of the people I think a lot of what you would wind up seeing is likely to be in topics that you might just never touch.
Yeah. If you're a nerd, you probably touch 3/4 of it.
Right. So I'd say is if there are specific sites you follow actively, I'd subscribe to those because you'll get a much denser kind of feed of things you're interested in.
And most of the time, the Twitter handle is the word stack followed by the keyword, but not always, because we couldn't always get that. Like, for example, electrical engineering is stack electronics with an X. And the canonical way to find that is to go to stackexchange.com/sites.
Well, the Stack Exchange feed is a good place to start. Because it gives you a sample of all the sites, and then the way it works is it retweets the other accounts, so you can use that to find the other accounts that you like and follow them directly, and then you'll get more questions from that site.
Speaking of the Twitter, there was a great deal of debate early on where a group of people inside the company who will not be named were very insistent that the Twitter feeds had to be 100% automated and generated by a robot that finds things.
So we did an experiment. We took 2 of the Twitter accounts and had people manually curate them.
Uh-huh.
And what we saw was a little bit better. Yeah, the gaming one and the Apple one for a while were being manually curated. And what we saw is kind of what we'd expect. You get fewer tweets because the person's just not around all the time.
Yeah.
You get slightly better responses. You get more people following, but overall you get less activity because it's tweeting less.
It might be interesting to have the automatic thing
and then the other thing that happened is that those 2 people ran out of time, and then then they stopped doing it, and we put it back on the automated one.
I think the idea is you have an automated one that generates a queue, and then you have a person and the queue will just sort of go automatically maybe 6 hours later. And then your job as an editor of the Twitter feed is to add things to the queue, remove things from the queue. But if you ever go to sleep, then the queue just sort of...
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, I don't think it really matters that much. It is a better ideal Twitter tweeting system, to have all this magic that moderators can go in and add stuff to the queue and edit it and move stuff up and down and get rid of stuff. But the reality is that
you can buy that does
you just don't see that much of an impact, and on a lot of these sites, the number of people following the account is fairly small. Just a bang for the buck sort of thing.
I think Twitter's a tricky way when you're looking for that kind of long tail you talk about, Joel, right? Where we kind of love these esoteric questions that a small subset of people, a medium that sends out one selected sample of something once in a while is tricky. Like we work better on some level for people who are kind of browsing through a list of questions, somewhat filtered, to then find the ones likely to interest them.
Yeah, that's kind of a different activity. I've been thinking about this because I'm trying to think about our long-term plans to make a feed of interesting stuff.
Yes.
So that's actually kind of easier because we make it interesting to you, versus the Twitter account is like it's like this weird sort of interesting to everybody, but also niche. But the problem is the more niche you get, the fewer people are going to be able to click on it, right?
Create a custom
So
Twitter
think about a Stack Overflow feed, right? What kind of questions does the Stack Overflow feed tweet? Because most people don't care about everything on Stack Overflow. They care about a few things, so you have to kind of break it down. So a personalized thing targeted is I think going to do much better.
Agreed. All right. Now, for you people listening at home, we never have enough stuff to talk about here, and we'd love to take questions from the listening audience. So if you go to s.tk/podcast questions, there will be some kind of way that you can submit a question for us, which we will play on the next podcast if it's any good and answer it.
We need a way to take written questions, I think, because last time there was only
send an email.
The barrier between, I think, recording your voice and sending it and typing a thing in a box is probably a different level.
Yeah, but it's useful to be able to sort of play.
No, I think the recordings are great, but we got, I was counting them up. We got 0 last time. So
we should have people type them in, and then we could have like one of those robot voices read it out loud.
We'll get James Earl Jones to read your question.
If you actually go to s.tk/podcast questions, there is a button that says that you can send a message. Is that only audio? I mean, it's got a little envelope on it.
Why don't you click it and see what happens?
It tells me to log in with Facebook.
Please go to the site and use an authentication method that we are not willing to use ourselves.
Maybe this is why nobody is.
Maybe I can log on with SoundCloud. It also says I'm using an old version of SoundCloud, which is very suspicious because it's a website. Alex, this whole thing is suspicious.
Yeah, they have a new version that they like, their new design and everything.
Oh.
Didn't any of your young relatives update your browser software over the holidays, Trey?
Send message. And okay, I'm logged on. No, you can send the email message. It says to Stack Exchange. You can just type text.
Oh, good. The notes made it imply that you'd have to record your voice.
Now, if you look up a little bit, you'll see a little envelope there. It says send message.
So type us a message.
You've been listening to Stack Exchange podcast number 40, the one with James Van Der Beek and
Lies.
Britton Payne, whatever his name was. We'll be with you again probably next week. I mean, right? No, there's nothing. Let me look on my calendar. Yes, we will be back again next week. Thank you all for listening.
Bye.
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 Not the mama.
I don't think that's
That's the wrong. There are a lot of right choices.
Not the mama.
That was good.
I think I'd buy a half-hour recording of you saying that over and over again.